Hello, welcome to the C50 podcast.
Jay, Becca, Bella, and myself all know that mental health is important, and those sitting around this table are either diagnosed with a mental illness or support someone who is.
If you're anything like us, you may be listening to this while you drive, work, clean, or you could be doing many other things. We would encourage you to visit www.c50hope.com, where you can follow up with our podcast and get more help.
We have worked hard to build C50 into a ministry that can reach those affected by someone's struggle with mental health and a deeper illness. We believe that a relationship with Christ is key in finding hope. However, we're not professionals. Think on our words, process them, but never consider us more important than a doctor or therapist you may be working with. We would love to recommend professionals that value all your needs, including medication and therapy, and will also point to Jesus Christ as the center of your life and the way for healing and taking you from hurt to hope.
There are a lot of people that give to C50 that make this all possible. We have people praying, many that give financially, people that donate time or space.
And as an example, we've found a home for the C50 podcast, generously donated for us at McQueen Builders in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, PA. Let's call this McQueen Studios. And this is where we pick up today. Hey, welcome to the C50 podcast. We're excited that you are listening. Today we are broadcasting from McQueen Studios with, to the people to the right is, the person to the right is? Bella. And across from Bella is?
Karen.
And Becca.
And we have a special guest on the phone today. And before, we could talk a lot about C50, but we want to jump right into this because this is a special guest. Not only is he an accomplished, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Uncle Wes, but he's been a psychologist for like 45 years or so. And so, this is going to be a great interview. So the person on the phone is my uncle, and his name is Wes Reilly. How are you?
I'm just fine. Good to talk with you, Jay.
Yeah. So your family, and I never realized that you had such a cool job until I was diagnosed, and I thought, man,
really?
Like, where was this guy for like my whole life, right? Way out in Oregon, right?
Way out in Oregon. Yeah, and thank you for saying Oregon correctly. A lot of people say Oregon. It's not Oregon, it's Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon. Yeah, I picked that up somewhere.
Oregon, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to let all the people that are listening to this podcast, I want to let you know. And then Uncle Wes, you can maybe should I call him Uncle Wes or just Wes? What'll be good?
Dr.
Reilly? Dr. Reilly?
You could do that too, but I like Wes best.
Okay, let's just go with Wes.
I've been Wes longer than I've been anything else. So.
Okay. Well, Wes, I'm going to have to get used to that. But you are not on the professional clock with this podcast, and so you're not giving out, like, I know that when I talk to you, you're always like when I had talked to you, you're always very quick to point out that you say, look, you got to talk to your therapist, you got to talk to your doctor, the people that you're working with, and, I'm not going to diagnose you. And so is that
Absolutely.
something? Okay, so anybody that's listening should keep in mind that although you are very experienced and you know what you're talking about, not only are you not in PA and with licensure and all that kind of stuff, you're not given any diagnoses over the phone and all that stuff today.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So this opinion, but it's coming from somebody who has been in the world of psychology for how many years?
35. I got my doctorate in 1978 and started practicing after that.
Very good. Very good. Wow. And then you're going to, this is a little side note, but you're wrapping up your practice sometime this summer, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I've finally gotten to the point where I think I'm ready to retire. And frankly, I hate to do that because I really enjoy what I do. I like what I do. But, it's time where maybe I spend a little bit more time with the grandkids and polish up the travel trailer and go see the U.S.
That sounds awesome.
Yes.
That sounds great. I wish I was retired. That's what I told him today. I was like, I wish I was retired. that sounds perfect.
We have a little ways to go yet.
Yeah, we have a little ways to go. But okay, and then lastly, before we jump into it, you are a diehard part owner of the Green Bay Packers. Is that correct?
That's correct. I own one share of stock in the Green Bay Packers. I'm an NFL owner.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That is really cool. But you know what? Everybody out here we're just diehard Steelers fans, and so we're going to have to disagree on that.
Well, you remember the last Super Bowl the Steelers were in, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Why did you bring it up, Jay?
Okay.
On.
Let's move on. Okay.
That was when the Packers beat you, right?
That's awesome. What do you have 6 titles? Is that right?
What's that?
Do you have 6 titles, the Green Bay Packers?
No, 13.
Oh.
13.
Okay, perfect.
The next closest one is Chicago with 9.
Oh my gosh.
That's NFL championships. That goes all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah. Man, I could talk about this all day, but I would love to talk to jumping into all this stuff. We need to hang out more. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your background, and I'm kind of talking a lot up front, and then the gals are going to jump in. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into psychology. How far back did it go? When did the psychology angle on life and the brain and work and all that? When did that come about, and what sparked it?
Well, early on, I decided to go to college. I'd been a police officer up to that point, and also I was working as a part-time youth pastor in a church, and decided I really wanted to do more of the youth pastor end of things, and decided I needed to go back to school. So I went to Cedarville, your old hometown, in Cedarville University, and got my bachelor's degree there. And went on to Rosemead School of Psychology, which is now part of Biola University in California, and got my master's and PhD. And following that, in 2005, I also got a postdoctoral degree in clinical psychopharmacology.
Wow.
And
that's
I've
awesome.
been in practice. It took me a year just to learn how to say that.
So does that make you able to, with that degree that I have, that I'm not even going to attempt to say back, does that make you able to prescribe medicine?
Well, there's 2 things you have to be able to prescribe medicine. Number 1 is you need the training. Well, I have the training. Number 2 is you need to live in a state that has passed a law that says psychologists with proper training can prescribe. Oregon hasn't passed that law, so I can't prescribe here yet.
Okay.
So a question that's kind of standing out to me right out the gate is, so how did you go from, wanting to be more of a youth pastor into psychology? Like, what made you take that jump over?
Well, it was a very difficult choice. I was at Cedarville at the time, and I was a Bible and pastoral studies major, and really, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I am really not cut out to be a pastor. And made a difficult decision. I really liked psychology at the time. And some of my professors there I was very appreciative of. And so I changed my major to psychology. It was a difficult decision, but one that I have not regretted.
What did Grandpa think about that when you did that?
Well, my dad always said, Wes, you could be anything you want, but it would sure be nice if you were a pastor. And my dad really wanted me to be a pastor. And, that kind of set me in a direction. It's part of why it was so hard for me to change my major to psychology, because I knew in some ways I was letting my dad down, even though he never said anything. And he was very supportive of me, becoming a psychologist. But I knew there was a part of him that was a little disappointed.
Yeah, and the only reason I bring that up is because no one's, has that question going, except for me, because I know Grandpa and you. But we're always at C50. We're trying to balance just like Christianity and faith, and like the mind and the psychology of the mind, and right. Even with medication, we're trying to find that balance. And so I just want to kind of lead in. I wanted that to lead into the next question. Well, last time I talked to you, you said something about how you got together, and this could be. I'm actually thinking about making this a whole nother podcast, and so we don't need to get into a lot of it tonight. Maybe we can have you back on to talk about this. But you saw a need for those, an awareness that Christ and his teachings, the Word of God, can and does fit with the psychology of the mind and some of the techniques that you've learned in school. And you actually started some things, right? Like you were part of a group of people that did that 30 years ago, right?
Yeah. The school that I went to, Rosemead, Biola University, is dedicated to the integration of psychology and theology. And there is a lot of overlap between psychology and theology. And later on, my partner and I decided to form Christian Psychological Services in Billings, Montana, and practiced under that title for quite a long time, with the idea that we wanted to provide a place that would give good psychological care, but yet assure people that we were not going to undermine or destroy their faith being an important part of who they are and their relationship with God.
So this is Bella talking, and I know going to church and experiencing what I've experienced in the past, some Christians or believers, they experience resistance to psychology because of their Christian beliefs. Have you experienced that, and how did you handle that in that instance?
Could you clarify? It's a little hard to hear you because of the echo. I'm not quite sure what your question was.
So either, I guess what Bella's trying to say is, be it either with yourself or maybe those that are clients of yours, have you found people that you're treating that are believers or Christians that are a little bit more resistant, if you will, to, seeking out a therapist or going to a psychologist because of their belief system? Like they don't see the connection between the two. Have you come across that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's one of the reasons, as I say, that we started Christian Psychological Services. So people would be aware that we were not, as I say, going to undermine their faith, but we were going to support their faith and as well as give them good psychological care.
So he says,
you see that resistance often in the Christian community, and it's really sad because if you go to a good psychologist, especially a Christian psychologist, you're going to get good care, and it's going to make a difference.
So you said that psychology supports faith. I think that's what you said, if I could quote you. And
yes.
Now this is a big. This could take the rest of the time that we have with you, but if you could sum it up as kind of fast as you can, how does psychology help faith, like help in that process there? How does it support it?
Well, if I've learned anything over the years that I've done this work, it's that we are created to be in relationships. People do not live in isolation. Relationships are essential for good, healthy growth and development in children, and also for continued growth as adults. And without healthy relationships in our life, there's a lot of problems that develop from that. One of the key relationships that you have, of course, is with your Creator. As far as basic human needs are concerned, there's a hierarchy of needs. At the base of that hierarchy is the need to belongingness, which is very, very important. And the next basic need up from that is the need for self-worth. And the next one up from that is the need for competence, to know that you can deal with life and the world. Well, if you match that up with theology, you see that your belongingness is to God the Father. Your self-worth comes from what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross, and your competence comes from the work of the Holy Spirit in your life.
Yeah, I love that, because it's not that you're betraying anything theological in order to I fit with the psychology of it. It really does support our faith, and so coming at it from
Absolutely.
that psychological perspective, that's great. I have a question. So for the first 10 years, was it about that long that you focused on a broad spectrum of ages?
Yeah. Well, probably about for the first 20 years.
Okay.
I was practicing in Montana. Well, for the first 3 years in Montana, I was clinical director of Yellowstone Treatment Center, which was a 125-bed residential facility for kids.
Wow. Oh, wow.
But then I went...
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then it was actually a working cattle ranch. It was great.
Well, that's cool.
And then I went into private practice, seeing adults and children.
Okay.
And then 25 years ago, we had an opportunity to move out here to Oregon. And in that move, I wanted to specialize in just kids, ages 4 to 17, and really focus on and get better in that one niche that I thought fit me better to begin with. And so that's what I did, and working with kids ever since.
Yeah, I was just going to say the age range that you just stated, that kind of took me back a step, to be honest with you. So the age range you wanted to focus on was 4 to 17. And I just...
Correct.
Now, Bella, my daughter, she... back when she was like 5 or 6, her pediatrician had said to her, Bella seems like an anxious child. You may want to consider talking with somebody. But she never actually... We never sought treatment for her until much later when she was 12. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is 4 years old. That just seems so young to me. So what type of diagnosis, like what, if you were seeing a 4 or 5 year old,
symptoms?
Yeah, like what did they have going on?
Well, first of all, when you work with young kids like that, you're really working with their parents.
Right.
Again, relationships are vital. And to make sure that the parent-child relationship is a good one and a healthy one is important. But the kind of problems that kids that young come in with generally are emotional dysregulation. They haven't developed the skill to deal with things like frustration. They are very rigid in their thinking, and when things don't go their way, you have a meltdown. They're terrible problem solvers, and confronted with something they're not expecting, they don't know how to deal with it and get through it. And so what we do, I work with parents to help these kids develop better skills in these areas, as well as working with the kids themselves.
So what are like a couple common coping mechanisms you would encourage parents? I'm just curious, kind of when kids are coming in at those young ages, 4 and 5, and not being able to handle frustration, for example. Do you talk with the children as well and the parents? Or I'm just wondering, like, how you coach them, generally speaking.
Yeah, I do both. One of the things I do is I send parents to a website that I really like a lot. It's Ross Green's website called livesinthebalance.org. Livesinthebalance.org. And he has a lot of very good information there. And Ross Green also has a book called Raising Human Beings. And he talks about an approach to these kids that's different than the typical approach that parents usually use. Because these kids can't respond to the kind of discipline that most kids will respond to in a good way. If these kids could respond, they would. They're not interested in making life miserable for everybody. They want things to go well.
That is so true.
But for a variety of reasons, they're just not able to respond in healthy ways to the things going on around them. So using the approach of Ross Green, which is called collaborative problem solving, we work with parents to help solve the problems that these kids are having with the child, and helping the child learn how to express the concerns that they have in words instead of just exploding, help them learn to be a little bit more flexible in their thinking, help them learn to come up with solutions to the problems that works for both the child and the parents. And over time, these kids learn and develop these skills and become better at it. But it's important that the parents are taking the approach that helps their kids do this.
So, okay, Bella has a question and I have a question, and Bella had her hand up first, but I'm going to jump in here.
Are you going ahead of Bella?
I'm jumping ahead of Bella for this.
Come on.
So I really want to know this here. So you're saying that you have to have parents involved in the process, right?
For children that young, certainly.
Well, at that age, the parents have to initiate it.
But even so, I'm just saying. Okay, let me ask you this: I was diagnosed later on in life, and my family, and my family is phenomenal,
Right.
but it just wasn't thought of to go to a psychologist when I was young, so I don't know what that was like. But Karen went with Bella, right? And
Yes.
so you were involved, right?
Correct. Go ahead, Bella.
I mean, to a certain extent, yeah.
I mean, I'm the one who had
involved.
initiated because
Yeah.
she was so young. Correct.
Right. Okay.
And being in 6th grade would be different than, the 4 and 5
Yeah.
year old as far as being in therapy.
But
with you.
honestly, when Bella, Wes, just to give you a little bit about Bella, Bella started seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist at the age of 12. But with regard to Bella's therapist sessions, after the initial visit, I wasn't in there with Bella. She was in there doing the session all by herself with the therapist. But again, Bella was 12, not
That's
4
a
or
significant
5.
difference,
Correct.
right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, 12-year-old on up is a little different. And it really depends upon what the child is struggling with. I have parents in with us for at least part of the time with 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, again, depending on what the concern or the issue is. Sometimes I meet with just the kids. But, that's kind of a judgment call.
So
A lot of times parents... What's that?
I was just going to ask a question, but you can finish your thought.
Yeah, a lot of times parents can be very supportive and helpful with older kids in encouraging them to use some of the skills and techniques and approaches that they learn in therapy, and kind of can ally with the therapist in helping the child. But again, it depends on the child. It depends on what we're dealing with.
So when I was first diagnosed when I was 12, and then I found out that my pediatrician, like you heard earlier, had told my mom that I should see a therapist when I was 5. And to me, that was like shocking that they even could see something at that young of an age. But someone that's later diagnosed, do you think at a younger age you can see signs, or is it different for everyone? I was just wondering, because for me, I thought that was crazy that they could see signs back then.
Sure. The time of your life when you have the most connections in your brain is age 5.
Wow.
After that, it's all pruning, where you prune away the connections that you don't use and you strengthen the ones that you do use. So if you have connections in your brain that kind of push you toward anxiety, for example, those connections are going to get strengthened unless you do something about it to change that around. So
Are you telling me if I would have had Bella at a therapist at 5, maybe we would have altered her path, if you will, if we would have, I guess so.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
I mean, you get somebody in there at 5, 6, 7.
It's possible, but my crystal ball doesn't work any better than anybody else's, so I can't tell you that for sure.
And then you
Thanks,
can
Mom.
think of it. Well, you can think of it from the other side too. If you would have waited until you were 18 or 20, how
Oh my
much
gosh.
worse?
Well, honestly,
It could have been.
Bella and I both have always said that we felt it was a huge blessing, actually. And people would think we were nuts when we said that, but we thought it was a huge blessing that Bella was diagnosed at such a young age, because then she was able to learn her
Yeah.
coping skills or what have you so much earlier in life to help deal with things as they come as she gets older. So,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
so Uncle Wes, Dr. Reilly, sorry about that.
Uncle Doctor.
I know some people that are younger that say, I have something like borderline. Now, those are different because it's talking more about psychotherapy rather than something that can be relatively fixed with some medication, right? Like bipolar. And you might shoot holes in what I'm saying, and that's totally fine. I want you to do that. But I guess, can you officially diagnose somebody when they are under 18 while they're still developing their mind? Is that why they wait? And what is it about borderline specifically with the psychotherapy that makes it so you can't diagnose somebody before they're 18?
Well, the diagnostic criteria itself says you have to be older than 18. And the reason for that is that borderline is usually a developmental problem. Almost always you see early trauma in a borderline's life or neglect, where they develop to the point where they don't trust the people around them. They don't trust them to be there for them. And so they have a hot and cold relationship with the important people in their life, wanting and needing them, but yet not trusting that they'll be there. And it goes back and forth and finally develops then into a personality disorder, the borderline personality disorder, that becomes almost a lifestyle in adulthood.
So are you saying if someone's younger than the age of 18, they may have all those symptoms, but because they're not fully developed, if you will, you can't diagnose them with that? Am I understanding that?
You can't diagnose them with borderline. Borderline itself says you have to be 18. That's just in the criteria.
Have you seen?
They can have a lot of symptoms, but we talk about it a little bit differently. There's other diagnoses that you would look at, such as disruptive mood disorder or oppositional defiant disorder or these sorts of things.
Wow.
Have you seen a progression with borderline in the way that it's treated, or seeing that? I feel like reading I did even just 10 years ago when Jay was first diagnosed was saying basically can't recover. And now I feel like I don't know if it's research. It's just the small articles I'm reading say it's more of a 10-year process. Have you seen a difference in the recovery and what that looks like, or has there been additional research? Do you know about that?
For borderline?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I only work with kids. So for the past 25 years, I haven't worked with borderline
that
very
makes
much.
sense.
I know that it's a lot of work. It takes time. It's not easy work. And there are specific approaches, such as DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and so on, that works well for people with that kind of a problem. And I don't do that kind of therapy. I refer folks.
Right.
So
if that's their issue.
What do you specialize in? Is there certain areas that you would specialize in?
Yeah, I see a lot of ADHD kids, of course. I see a lot of disruptive behavior in kids. This is kind of an interesting thing. I see a lot of anxiety in kids. And when I started out 45 years ago, I rarely saw kids with anxiety. That's something that's really developed over the past 40 years. And I believe it's because of 24-hour news.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, when I was a kid, we didn't even have a TV until I was 10. But, the news was 15 minutes every night, and that was that. And now we have several stations broadcasting news 24 hours a day, glorifying all the horrible stuff that's going on in the world so that they can get viewers. And it scares the dickens out of parents. And so parents now are telling their kids, be careful, it's a dangerous world out there. Don't go out of my sight. This is something bad will happen to you. And the kids are hearing this and becoming more and more anxious all the time.
Wow.
So I kind of see that through teenagers, I think, nowadays through social media and just trying to, and having like these social media influencers, just people trying to keep up appearances and stuff like that. And I feel like there's a ton of pressure from social media.
that's a whole other dimension that's new in the past, 5 to 10 years at the most, is social media that has really ramped up the anxiety in a lot of kids.
I have just one more question, about anxiety. So you're saying that you mostly see, can anxiety be a chemical thing, or is it mainly a personality thing that you kind of gain over time? Or can it be something that you're kind of born with, if that makes sense?
Well, some people are more prone to develop anxiety. There are genetic factors involved.
Mm-hmm.
Some kids, just kind of start out with kind of one strike against them, but it really depends again upon the relationships that you have and how as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. How kids are taught to deal with their fears and anxieties, and how they're assured that we really do live in a safe world. And the fact of the matter is, we live in the safest time in human history right now.
What are the things, Wes, that you could say just quickly? Say, you know what, if you have any questions about your kid acting this way, do they go to their PCP or their pediatrician really and start asking those questions? Do they make a call to someone like you, a psychologist? Where do they go?
Right. What's a good starting point? Yeah.
Well, certainly a pediatrician is usually a pretty good starting point, but there are some pediatricians that just aren't really tuned into psychological issues. But if you have concerns, and the best indicator of needing to see a psychologist is a parent who has concerns. If you have concerns, call a psychologist and say, I'd like to bring my kid in, talk with them to see if I'm overreacting or whether there's something there that we need to deal with. And, a good psychologist will evaluate the situation and give you a straight up answer that, this is not something to worry about, or, I think this child could use therapy.
I think that's awesome because I know, speaking from our own personal experience, like when, Bella's pediatrician had initially said that back when she was 5, my husband and I, we were probably your typical. I guess maybe I'm hoping you were your typical. And we were like, oh, Bella's going to grow out of it. It's something she's going to grow out of, and, let's just wait it out type thing. Which obviously was the wrong thing. Yeah, that was the wrong thing to do. So I love that you're saying people don't, I guess these parents out there that are listening, they can definitely go check, go schedule an appointment with a psychologist, and that psychologist is then going to evaluate your child, and they're going to say, hey, you know what, yes, you're not overreacting. We need to, schedule some further sessions or what have you. Or they may say, you know what, maybe you're not seeing this clearly, or you're not seeing this properly, and there's nothing to worry about. But it's good just to get that professional opinion if you have any doubts or thoughts that something may not be right.
Absolutely. It's worth the time.
And related to that...
And make sure that whomever you take your child to knows about child psychology. Not all psychologists are trained in child adolescent psychology.
That is so true.
And... you need somebody who knows kids.
Right.
So do some people see children and adults then? Or what do you, I guess.
Oh, yes.
I have a two-part question.
Yeah, absolutely. For the first 20 years of my practice, I saw children and adults.
Okay. And then specifically, if you're wanting someone who's coming from a Christian perspective, that's, it's a hard thing to ask. I know I've experienced this when I was looking for a therapist, and I called the insurance company and I got a list of all the different therapists, and then I'm calling the office, and you feel kind of weird saying, I'm looking for, is this person, or I'm looking for a Christian, but is there a good wording to use, or faith-based, or if someone's a believer, is there a specific way to ask that?
I know, if I may jump in, but I know like our insurance, when I call in, I'm looking for, or I go on their website, I'm looking for a therapist. One of the filters, if you will, is Christian counseling. And they'll flat out, you could choose that, and it'll list the psychologists that are of Christian faith.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, most insurance companies, I have to be re-credentialed by insurance companies every so often. And one of the things they ask me, any specialties that I might have, and ask if I am a Christian and so on. So insurance companies know these things, and you can ask.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you can ask, call their office and ask their staff.
Right.
Yeah. I want to jump back to a quick question that's been it's on our paper here. I want to make sure we get it in. Okay, so you said that you are trained in the medication side, but you don't prescribe because of Oregon kind of law and whatnot. Right. But for people that are out there that their kids take medication, and I mean, obviously you're not given. Well, I don't know. You know what? I have no idea. I don't know what age, how young someone can be to start taking medication, but as they start to get older and they're still developing, do they take strong medication like antipsychotics and things like that? And how does that affect the brain with just sort of altering things while they're developing and whatnot?
Well, it depends on the medication, first of all. Like kids with ADHD, the only way you can really manage ADHD well is with medication. As much as we'd like to try it other ways, it just doesn't work. And kids with anxiety, using selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors can be very, very helpful, very useful. There are kids who we do give some of what are called atypical antipsychotics to, kids that are aggressive and violent, and these medications help calm them down. Now, a lot of these medications can be protective in their function because, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of pruning that goes on as the child and adolescent brain develops. And medication can help calm down some of the pathways that lead to difficulties and strengthen the pathways that allow for better coping skills and so on. So there's a lot of protective function there with medication as well as potential problems, potential side effects. Not all kids are good on medication. Depends on the individual. So you need somebody who knows these medications and is willing to work with you to prescribe them.
Yeah, so that's really encouraging, I think, for all of us that are listening to go from a professional's point of view. Not only are medications done in the right way, and obviously you're always trying to figure those out, and I want to ask you another question about how to tweak those medications, but done in the right way, they can actually be a benefit and not a detriment. So, I mean, so we can just write that off and say, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize, excuse me, to recognize that the benefits of medication are there and something that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think that's great that you say that, because I remember when I went to my first therapist when I was 12, the first thing that she said after she saw me for like a few times, Mom, you can jump in if you need, but she said that Bella needs to be put on medication before we can really start anything, because I was just so not there that I wasn't going to be able to apply the coping skills that, like I don't know, Mom. I don't know what she said.
Right.
But
Basically, Bella was in full-blown panic mode, and she really wasn't able to do anything. So because of her panic attacks, her therapist at the time basically said for her to even reach Bella and for Bella to even begin to apply some of the coping mechanisms that she's trying to teach her, her brain needed to relax and calm down a little bit and to get out of that panic mode. Correct. So for Bella, it was basically essential. Like she needed to get on that medication to really apply what she was learning in therapy.
And that's how it was for Jay.
I tell parents that same exact thing all the time because it's true. Something like a panic attack can be so overwhelming. You can have all of these great tools and techniques to try to manage the anxiety, but it very quickly gets overwhelmed by the anxiety, and all these great tools just go out the window.
That is so true.
Okay, so I got a question before we flip the page, and we need to keep going. I know you got some kids to pick up, and life is moving on out there
Yes,
in
my
Oregon.
granddaughter. I have to take my granddaughter to ballet.
And like I said, don't forget to tell Katie I said hello and whatnot.
I'll let her know.
Yeah, we got a couple more for you. And this is the last one about medication, I believe, from me. Does medication, the dosages and what you're on and all that change? Say you start taking medication for, ADHD or what, you name it. Does it change as somebody's body develops and as they get bigger and all this stuff? So is that a constant sort of thing that you have to do, is go back to change?
Sure. Yeah, any prescriber is going to want to see their patient periodically to evaluate how it's working. As I see kids grow up, the medication isn't working as well sometimes, and they need a higher dose, and that's fine. Also, you have to be aware that other medications can interfere with certain psychotropic medications, and if your psychotropic medication is not working well, you need to check to make sure you aren't taking some other medication that might be hindering the usefulness of your medication.
So I want to speak kind of as a parent here for a moment. And I'm sure you run across this a lot, maybe not, but I'm sure you do. But there seems to be so many, say, parents and even, children out there that they're almost afraid to start the process, if you will, of seeing a therapist, having their child see a therapist, or, the stigma of what may come along with all of that for them as the parent,
right.
Or the child. Like maybe as from the parent perspective, what did you not do? Or, what did you do wrong, if you will, that your child now has this going on? So how do you address that with those parents out there that may be listening right now, to just honestly, they have to just toss that aside, and their child's well-being needs to come first, and they can't worry about all that?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Children suffer a lot, and sometimes suffer in silence, especially kids with things like ADHD or anxiety. You don't know how much they really are suffering. And I hate to see kids suffer when there are good means of helping them live healthier, more enjoyable, fulfilling lives.
What would you say so you're encouraging the parents and it's going to be okay. What would you say to a youth, and I'm sure you've sat in the office with many youth over the years, that might have a fear of being labeled as mentally ill, or they got some sort of illness or something like that. How would you just what would you say to them as a psychologist to say, you know what, it's part of the deal. You're going to be okay. What would you tell somebody to encourage them? What would you tell a kid to encourage them?
When I talk with kids, I don't talk in terms of diagnoses or mental illness or that sort of thing. I tell kids that, first of all, I'm not the kind of doctor who gives shots. No shots at my office. Number two, I'm the kind of doctor that talks with kids about problems that they might be having and ways that we can find to make those problems better. I'm always in favor of making stuff better. And kids buy into that.
Yeah, so they feel that support from you, and you become a safe person for them to talk to. Yeah.
Have you ever had to, say, sit down with like a teenager where you could talk more about the diagnosis with them? And I feel like because a lot of teens nowadays, their image is the most important thing to them, and they care what everyone else thinks about them. And hearing that they might have a mental illness or a mental disorder or something that's going on that not everyone else can see, that might be very discouraging to them. So have you ever had an instance where you had to be encouraging? And what exactly would you say to a teenager that may look at it as like a negative thing?
Well, first of all, I tell them nobody but you and I are going to know that you come here. Mm-hmm. It's all confidential. Nobody knows. Secondly, you're not happy the way things are going right now, or you wouldn't be here. And there's things that we can do to make your life happier and more fulfilling. tools that you can use and maybe medication along the line. But nobody needs to know about it. Excuse me.
So how have you seen faith play a part in the healing of all the clients that you've seen over the years?
Did you say how faith plays a part?
Correct.
Well, again, it speaks to relationship. Where you have a relationship with your Creator who cares deeply for you and loves you, and that gives you a pretty solid foundation to move out from and deal with whatever life brings your way. And as long as you know that, and as long as you have faith in your Creator, you can continue to cope with things in a better, healthier way.
Yeah, I just think that it would be interesting to see you in action and not even telling how God is wrapped up in all of this, because you're using different words and different terms, but it's really pointing to a Creator, right? So like everything you do does point to Jesus Christ, but how much do you have to do that in your practice, like secretively, or just like you don't tell somebody, it's just like they think.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
All truth is God's truth. And if what I am talking to people about is truth and, based on good, solid research and evidence, it's God's truth. So, another thing is, I think the majority of the people that I see are not Christians. So they're not asking me about issues in regard to faith and so on.
Yeah.
So I give them good psychological care. I give them truth as I see it, and point them toward a better, healthier way of life.
Yeah, and maybe little do they know that that truth is from the Lord. So the last question, I'm going to give you one last question, and I just want to say that it's going to be the last word, so we're going to let you go on out with it. We're not going to jump in with any more questions. So the last question before we go is, after 40 years of seeing into the mind that God created, you have a really neat perspective on who God is. So how would you describe God to someone that may not know Him after all that experience that you have?
Wow, that's quite a question, Jay. I think what I would have to do is go back to what I was saying earlier, the whole aspect of human beings needing to be in a relationship or relationships. And what psychology, again, has taught me about God is that relationships are important to Him. Part of the image of God in us is relationships. God Himself has relationships in the Trinity, as well as relationships with us as His creation. And to really be complete people, whole people, we need to understand and live out that relationship with our Creator as best we can.
Thanks for listening today. Again, we have tried hard to share truth authentically, and we hope that this has been a helpful time in your life. To reach us, donate, share your story, and give us feedback on how we can do a better job reaching people that are struggling. Please go to www.c50hope.com.
We leave you with this. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. And remember, as Jack Miller said, you're far more loved than you ever dare imagine.